Welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I am Connor Williams and we're here for a scouting video on Demarai Gray. I am joined by Tom, who writes for he's a German football writer for GGFN, Get German Football News. Tom, welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. So just to start us off, what do you think of the signing? Do you think it's a good move for Everton?
I personally do. I think for the money you're paying, I think it makes a lot of sense. He's a player that blows very hot and cold. I think we've seen that in pretty much every club he's been at, even back to his Birmingham City days. And I think in that sense, it would be a risk if it was for a higher fee, in my opinion. But I think for the money you're paying, you're going to have a good squad player, someone who's never really lived up to his potential, but is always on the cusp of it and shows glimpses. And if you can get a couple of those moments out of him in a season, I mean, he's going to get you points. He might even win you games. He's that kind of player. So I think I think it will do him some good to be back in the UK as well. I think Everton's a good fit for him at the minute, with the way sort of the direction of the team and everything like that. And he's not going to come in and be a starter, in my opinion. But he's a good squad player, and he's a player who I still believe, despite being 25 now, I still believe he can find that level that we always thought he would get to, and deliver. So hopefully that can be the case for him at Everton.
No worries. So what has his performances been like at his time at Leverkusen? From the stats, it says he's only played 12 games, scored once and got 2 assists.
Yeah, so it's been a really strange time for him in Leverkusen, really. He's been, I guess, unlucky in a few regards because there's been managerial changes. When he first arrived, he was under Peter Bosch, who was former Ajax manager and Leverkusen, and he was doing really well at the club for the first couple of years he was there. He got them to the cusp of the Champions League, and then players like Kai Havertz left and a few others left, and it just that form began to wane a little bit, and they got rid of him. And again, I think every manager since then, Wolf and the new guy from Young Boys, they just haven't really seemed to fancy him. And it's one of those, I mean, there's not a lot you can do, really. His form started off very, very well, scored on his debut in a 5-2 win, played really well, looked really sharp, looked like he looked like the kind of player that would blossom in the Bundesliga, really. And then if just steadily from there, his form just started to dip and ebb away, and he just never really seemed to get going after that. And again, I think a part of that is because of the managerial changes, and clearly one of them just hasn't. I've just seen something they don't like, or they prefer other players. Leverkusen have a wealth of talent in wide areas. They've got Leon Bailey, who Demarai took the position of for a little while, but now he's refound his form. You've got Florian Wirtz, who's a very, very talented young player. Even Moussa Diaby, who's impressed a lot in Germany. So it's tricky to get into that team. I think it's similar at Everton, I guess, where there's going to be a lot of competition for those wide spaces, and he's going to really have to fight for it. But yeah, I think part of it is misfortune. Part of it is perhaps that tendency of his to just lose form out of nowhere, seemingly when everything's looking good again. So it's been a frustrating time, and I think everyone wanted to see him do well in Germany because he never quite got a consistent run in the Leicester team, despite all the success they had while he was there. So it's unfortunate, but I think the Everton move makes a lot of sense for him.
No problem. So why do you think Leverkusen are looking to sell him on so early into his career at the club?
Again, I just think it's a excuse me, it's a managerial issue. For whatever reason, I think the manager's looked at the side he wants to develop, and has said that this guy, who clearly is going to want first team football. We know that a lot of the reason these English players go to Germany, particularly younger players, is because they feel like they'll get their chance out there. From Sancho to Bellingham to Bennett to a few others. And if he's only getting 10 games in the second half of the season and less games as the season goes on under new management, I mean, the writing was kind of on the wall for him, really. And I think, again, for Leverkusen, they're trying to rebuild. They're trying to use the Havertz money and money they may get for Leon Bailey too, I think, to really reinvest and go and try and get into the Champions League, and that will be a big windfall for them financially. So, yeah, it's one of those. I think it's just misfortune, and clearly the higher ups don't rate him as highly as the previous managerial manager did. And again, in that sense, he's fairly unlucky, but he does have to take some responsibility too, because after that really good start, things just started to unravel a little bit. So it's just one of those. I think it's a combination of misfortune and this mysterious lack of form that he seems to suffer from time to time.
No problem. So obviously you mentioned the higher up at the club. What do the fans at Leverkusen make of him, and how do they feel about his time at Leverkusen? Was he well liked?
I think it's hard to say because we didn't really have fans in the stadium for most of the time he was there. By all accounts, like on the socials and stuff, I think it was viewed as another one of those English players going to Germany for a very small fee. And at the start, you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a bargain. Initially it was a loan deal, then it was like an 18-month contract. So I guess that was indicative of maybe they didn't have as much faith in him as they should have, because surely you'd offer him a longer term deal if you really believed in him. So maybe that was, but yeah, I think he was well liked by the fans and by most people at the club, because again, he's a player who on his day can turn a game for you and win you a game, but he was just down the pecking order. And I think for the price they're selling him for, a lot of Leverkusen fans will probably say, just leave him in the squad because we know he can deliver off the bench. He's got a bit of magic in his boots and stuff. So yeah, I think fans generally are just a bit dismayed by the low fee. And again, it's a tricky one, because if they do lose him and if they do lose Leon Bailey, all of a sudden there's a little bit of lack of depth there, in my opinion, in terms of the wide areas. So I guess fans would be a bit concerned by that. But, again, I think there was a genuine fondness for him when he first started, just like there was a fondness for him with Leicester fans and Birmingham fans, because they know what he can deliver. It's just a bit of a frustration when he doesn't do it often enough. He's one of those kind of players. So, again, hopefully Everton can change that, and hopefully we see the very best of him.
So do you think the fee, for not just for us, but also for Leverkusen, do you think it's good for us and possibly could be quite bad for them? Do you think they're letting him
Yeah. I'm hesitant to say bad, because you can't really say that he commanded a bigger fee for the club when he only played 10 games and scored 1 goal. I mean, it's statistically, you'd say, okay, well, he doesn't really command a 10-20 million pound fee. But then again, he's 25. We know what he can do. I think he showed that for Leicester for many years, what he can do on his day. And so, yeah, in that sense, I think if you're a Leverkusen fan, you're feeling a bit aggrieved by that, because you want to essentially rebuild an entire team around guys like Florian Wirtz, and you're going to need money and you're going to need depth in order to get where you want to be. So I think for them it's bad, but again, for Everton, for me, it's a win-win, because even if he doesn't go on and become an Everton great, he could have a couple of good performances, and then you could sell him on for double, or something in that region. And I think that would be a win either way. I can't see him just going to Everton and just not playing at all. I think he'll get minutes, and I think he'll have a really good platform to show what he can do. But I think for Everton, it just makes an awful lot of sense, and I'm sure there are plenty of other Premier League clubs who are thinking about a deal too for that kind of money, because that there's not a lot of downside, but there's a lot of upside potentially. So I think it makes a great deal of sense.
No problem. So from what you've seen, what are his strengths and weaknesses?
Again, I think the ability to beat a man. Again, he's got that bit of magic where he can skin a player, and he can. His crossing was quite good at Leverkusen too, because he had Patrick Schick, who we all saw at the Euros, and what he can do in terms of his aerial ability. And his crossing seemed to improve quite a bit at Leverkusen, but I do think his real asset is just playing on both flanks. He's quite two-footed. He cuts inside well, and again beats his man well. It's always been a bit. The end product has maybe not been there, and I think you could also argue that the goals haven't been there as much as they should have done. He should have probably scored more goals than he has done, and finishing is a bit of a concern. But in terms of that, he's just a live wire. He can get you on the edge of your seat, like when he's really up for it, and he can beat a man, and he can make things happen. I think that's his biggest strength, and not the most consistent in front of goal either. And again, maybe he can be a bit of a passenger sometimes if he might just drift out of the game a little bit if he isn't getting the ball or whatever. But for me, as a late substitute, when defenders are tiring, his ability to just get in behind and make things happen and drink inside and that kind of thing, I think could be really valuable for a team like Everton, who those kind of options could be really useful, I think.
Yeah, we certainly could do with a bit of pace down that side.
Yeah.
What was the system that Leverkusen used him in?
It was a combination, really. Again, it's a small sample size because he only played about 10 games, and a lot of those were off the bench. But he either played like wide of a front three on the left, or again, I think he played a couple of games at wing back as well at times because it was the former manager's tactic of choice. And you know what? I think wing back is a position that could suit him relatively well long term because he's got the attributes for it. Again, maybe he switches off defensively a little bit too much for that, but he's got the raw physical attributes to be like an up and down wing back. But yeah, predominantly it was just sort of either side of a front three was where he would play, and again he can play both relatively comfortably. Although I would say he's slightly better on the left and like cutting inside. But it's one of those where he never really found his position that he nailed down, and he was just kind of used in a variety of areas. I think he played one game centrally as well, where like Verts went out wide and that kind of thing. So I think he's very versatile, but maybe just hasn't found his position yet that he's most comfortable in, and that a manager really trusts him in.
No problem. So we might as well mention quickly while we're on about Leverkusen and fast wingers. Last time you were on the channel, you were joined by Thomas and you talked about Leon Bailey. A year on, and Bailey's still at Leverkusen, but there's now new links linking him away to Aston Villa for a supposed 30 million, and Everton have been linked again according to The Athletic. So he's definitely on our shortlist. Should Everton look to get him in if they can afford him? And can you just talk a bit about what is the talk about Bailey at Leverkusen? Do they expect him to go, or are they confident they can keep the player this summer?
I think there is an expectation that the player will leave eventually. He's been wanting that Premier League challenge for a while now. I think it's weird, his career at Leverkusen, because he can go through these bizarre periods of just no form at all, and he can't get into the team. And guys like Gray and DRB are well ahead of him. And then all of a sudden, he just seems to reignite again. He'll come back into the team and score 10 goals and look like the player we all thought he was a couple of years ago. So again, it can be quite hot and cold, but 30 million, given the potential that's there, given what he can do on his day, I think he's about right. And I think for a club like Villa, it would be a steal, and probably for Everton too, because you're getting a real player of quality who was linked with the likes of United and Bayern Munich only a couple of years ago. So, and again, I still believe that player is in there. He's just another victim of the managerial changes, in my opinion. Again, certain managers have came in and have preferred the likes of DRB and a few others, and he's just that whenever he gets a bit of momentum, it seems to be knocked back again. So I think if Everton are in a position financially to put their hat in the ring, I would say it makes a lot of sense. It seems as if Villa are quite fancy to get him, or to at least make a move. But if Everton come in, then it's a hugely appealing club to be at right now in terms of the project and the money that's being pumped in and that kind of thing in the new stadium. So yeah, I think he could be tempted. And again, Leverkusen, the big thing for them is just rebuilding and assembling a real team around youngsters like Florian Wirtz, who they believe can kind of carry them to bigger and better things. And I think with them, it's more of a long-term project. And players like Leon Bailey probably aren't really in those long-term plans, because the higher ups are going to know that he wants to be elsewhere eventually. I don't think Leverkusen was ever the end goal for Bailey. I think it was always a case of, okay, I'll go there, I'll make my name for myself, and then make the big move. Hasn't quite worked out that way, but I think he would see Everton or Villa as the next move and as a step up for him. Yeah, I think it would suit all parties. And again, it's a lot of money for both clubs, but worthwhile in my opinion. And I think it's as true as what I said a year ago, pretty much, because he's had this strange season where half of it was not too great, and then he's came alive again towards the later months of the season. So, there's a player in there waiting to be unearthed, and I think Everton would be a really good fit for him.
No problem. That's brilliant. Thank you. I just want to get your thoughts on something you said about English players that go over there looking for first team football. How much different is that league to the Premier League? Do you think they're similar and he'll adapt back into the Premier League, or do you think it'll take a bit of time for him to get used to it?
I think he'll adjust pretty easily again. He spent all of his career bar pretty much a season in England, so I think he'll pick up where he left off. Generally the biggest differences in Germany are just the I guess the open-ended nature of games. There's a lot less sort of defensive solidity. Games are quite open and there's a lot of space to be exploited. It's quite frantic at times, but that has been kind of toned down by the lack of fans. I think in Germany the fan culture is huge, and the fans play a really big part in this like opera of the game. And he never really had that. He never really sort of sampled that German atmosphere and got accustomed to it. So I think for him, he'll go back to largely to where he left off. I'm not sure about the managerial differences and whether that'll be a problem or whatever. But again, and Leicester and Everton, I think there's similarities there in terms of their ambitions and the sort of the infrastructure and the goals they have and the finances and so on. So I think it will just go back to how it was before. Again, his aim would have been to go to Germany and really like solidify himself as a guaranteed starter and almost do like a Leon Bailey, where in a couple of years' time he's got Everton's and Liverpool's like offering 30 million for him. Hasn't quite worked out like that, but again, there's still time. He's 25 years of age. Feels like he's been around forever, but he's still fairly young and still fairly promising. So yeah, I think the adjustment should be fine, really.
No worries. I just want to know finally, just your final thoughts on the transfer as a whole, on the Demarai Gray one.
Yeah, I think it makes an awful lot of sense for Everton as a club. Makes a lot of sense for the player too. If he just wasn't ever going to be in the manager's plans, then so be it. Again, clearly it wasn't really a great fit over there. He tried, didn't work out, and now you go back to a club like Everton, where again I believe he'll get minutes and he'll get the chance to prove himself, and it's really just up to him now as to what he does. I think it's a club that will give him that opportunity to shine. And like you say, I think it's also a team with a need for a player like him, with that pace off the bench to come on and change a game. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he does next. And it may not make complete sense for Leverkusen because they would have hoped to get a bit of a profit on him, but I think for Everton and I think for the player, it makes a great deal of sense. So yeah.
No problem. I just want to say thank you very much for coming on, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, comment down below your thoughts on the Demarai Gray transfer after this conversation. Are you excited for it? Does this excite you? It's certainly an area we do need. You can follow myself, the Toffee Blues, and Tom on Twitter. The links will be in the description down below. And as always, stay safe.